The 10th National Assembly was inaugurated on June 13, 2023, with promises of effective legislation and strong oversight. But for the past 3 years, how well have they done? How well have they delivered? Beyond the bills passed and motions raised, what impact has it had on Nigerians? Today on Political Arena, we will be discussing that with my guest, Edwin Mack, and I remain your host, Onie Shukrah.
Thank you.
Hello, Edwin.
I'm fine, thank you.
How have you been? How is it?
Thank God.
Okay, so can you give us an oversight of the 10th legislature?
Well, overview of the 10th legislature or the 10th National Assembly has been quite a productive one in numerous angles or from numerous perspectives. I mean, they've tried their best when it comes to lawmaking, which is their primary function according to Section 4 of the Nigerian Constitution. I mean, they've tried in that aspect. But then again, much is still desired on their part in terms of, oversight and their independence. So, I mean, but in terms of lawmaking, which is their primary responsibility, they've, been up to task when it comes to that. Thank you.
The House has considered thousands of bills, but only a fraction become law. Should we focus on the number of bills introduced or their actual impact on Nigerians?
Definitely impact. Definitely impact. I mean, when we consider the number of bills, I think for the first 2 years, when the 10th Assembly actually came on board, according to their legislative tracker, they recorded that they had about 2,263 bills. And of those 2,000 plus bills, about 183 passed the third reading, passed the third stage. And from just a fraction of that, we had only about 51 that became laws. But then again, in considering those 51, we're now beginning to ask ourselves, how impactful have they been on the part of Nigerians? I mean, if we are to look at it from a holistic standpoint, it is better off to have a bill that addresses, say, the electricity problem of Nigeria, to maybe thousands of other bills that seeks to name institutions after individuals. So definitely impact. Definitely impact.
In their first 2 years, they passed 186 bills and 51 receiving assents from the government. So what does that say about their impact?
Well, if we are to look at it, what it says is that, there have been quite activity on their own part. Yes, it signifies that they're actually doing why we send them there. But then again, like I said, it all hinges and draws back to how effective or how it have affected the lives of the individuals, that's the people, their constituent members of whom they represent. So I wouldn't ordinarily, equate it to productivity. So I would just say that it reflects a strong activity on their part. Thank you.
Okay, so as a Nigerian, we've had some uproar about them agreeing with anything the executives pass.
Okay.
What would you say about that?
You see, this is quite, a nuanced perspective. If we are to look at it, cooperation, there's no problem with them cooperating with, the executive. Where it now becomes, bad or where it becomes terrible is a situation where, they welcome insubordination. Insubordination being that maybe them not necessarily exerting their powers, they tend to be, is it a second strata? They tend to be a second strata of the executive. So there is nothing wrong in them cooperating with them. But where it now becomes terrible is a situation where they tend to assent to anything that is being brought before their table. They tend to, just do everything that suits the whims and caprices of the executive. So, but then again, if we are to look at it overall, it all hinges on the fact that they should cooperate, but in as much as they are doing that, they should also try as much as they can to do their oversight functions, because as well as I know, there are latent functions and then there are oversight functions. So they should try as much as they can to equally pay credence or pay allusions to the oversight functions that they have, which is maintaining their independence as, an arm of government.
And at the end of the day, they are there to represent the people.
Of course.
Okay, so there's been some gap between what the legislative promised and what they have delivered. What would you say about that?
Well, as regards what they have promised and what they've delivered so far, if we are to look at it, I mean, they have, before some of them actually gained, came into the National Assembly, they made some promises to their constituent members. And for most of them, much or some of them has actually been achieved. Yes, some of them has actually been achieved, but not all. I mean, if we are looking at it, there are many constituents that don't really know what actually goes on in that parliament. They just feel that, I mean, the person that we send there has actually gone to that place, and they have not really been receiving update as they ought to. They've not really been seeing the value of why they send those people there. And even to some extent, there is this thing that is predominant amongst people, amongst folks, among constituents. They feel that, oh, they have now attained the rise of demigods. I mean, if they are just there, it's only when they need them. They feel that the only time they need these people is when they come back to seek for their votes.
For
But then
second
again,
time.
it's just, I mean, they've been able to achieve some of, the things they promised.
I mean, some senators or some legislators have achieved some things.
Of course, they've achieved something.
Okay, so I picked something from what you said.
Okay.
You mentioned something about the people they are representing not paying attention to what their representatives are doing in the House.
Yes.
Does that boil down to the level of education, or it is apathy on the part of the people?
Well, I think this problem of apathy, some of them or some of these constituents, they feel that there is little or nothing they can do when it comes to their. I was having a conversation with some people and they didn't even know what the recall was.
Yes.
So you can actually see, it's not, I wouldn't really call it apathy because this apathy comes with ignorance. It is only when you know that something can actually be done. That is, I mean, you can actually exact such a thing. But then again, like I said, most of them are apathetic towards this whole thing. They are apathetic. They don't really know about it.
I mean, we have seen from cases where people only focus on the president. They
Exactly.
only see him as the grand commander in
Exactly.
chief of the federation, but they do not focus on their governors, their local government chairmen, their representatives, as we're talking about at the moment.
They just feel that it's the president that
everything is
has all the
capability.
responsibilities.
Yes. Okay, so the 10th Assembly has been accused of being too close to the executive. At what point does cooperation become a threat to legislative independence?
Like I said earlier, insubordination in a situation where they feel themselves subordinate to, the executive. All these things are ordinarily supposed to be, they should have an equal playing ground amongst each other. They should checkmate each other. But then again, at the point of they seeing themselves as not ordinarily, being all that powerful, because they see anybody that is at the helm of affairs at the executive, they feel that that person is, the god of everything. So I really just personally have mentioned the fact that cooperating with them is not really bad. Yes, cooperating with the executive is not really a bad thing. But then again, in as much as they're trying to do that, they should strike a balance. They should really strike a balance between their duties and then the oversight functions of checkmating. That's keeping separation of power actually alive.
Edwin, we would come back to this conversation, but for now, we will be going on a short break. Do stay and join us. We're having a discussion about the representative being subordinate to the executive. That is where it becomes a threat to legislature and them as an arm of government. However, do you not think they cannot be independent? They cannot be independent if they were elected by the executive, like they were put there by the executive and not exactly their people?
Well, you now begin to, because as far as I know, it is the people that have all the power. I mean, even down to the president, they are the one that elected the lawmakers into offices. And as such, they have the power to take them out of there through their right of recall. Because, I mean, from my understanding of constitutional law, I know that the lawmakers can actually be recalled by their people. So you can't ordinarily say that it is the executive that actually put them there, because, I mean, the executive themselves are fighting for their their own head in terms of getting into offices. So, I mean, you can't particularly say it's Mr. President or the governor that put them there. No. In as much as I know that these people actually play some roles, I mean, they move some strings when it comes to, whoever gets there. But then again, ultimate power resides with the people who can actually remove them.
That brings me to the next questions. Previous assemblies were more confrontational with the executive. Has the 10th Assembly softer approach improved governance or weakened oversight?
As regards that, well, I think I would go with the both of them. I wouldn't want to really give a straight answer to this, but then again, both confrontation and then a softer approach, they have their own, they have their own problems. They have their own problems. But the approach in which is going, if we can say that the softer approach that the 10th Parliament has actually employed, I mean, we've seen instances of how they've been able to make numerous laws that have affected the lives of citizens. For example, the tax act, yes, because it's an act now and it's operational. It started in operation in 2026 January. So if we are to look at it, I mean, they've not been able to achieve some things in the sense that they going to Mr. President and then asking for assent as regards a particular bill that will better the lives of citizens. So we can't really say that it or them being confrontational have actually or will actually yield,
Positive
results
results.
as it ought to. But then again, like I said, when it comes to the softer approach that they are trying to adopt, it has been effective to them if they feel that, oh, that is actually what, they would ordinarily use in achieving what they are set out to achieve. I mean, it is not like we've ever seen before. It is not like we've ever seen before. They've been able to pass numerous laws with the help of Mr. President and his assent. So I think that's just that.
Okay. The House has raised motions on national issues. Now, the question is, what happens after those motions have been raised?
Well, ordinarily, going to according to the House procedure and the proceedings, when motions are raised, they are being referred to the appropriate committees. But we now begin to ask ourselves, these kind of motions that are being raised, how effective has the follow-up actually been? It's not enough to just for a lawmaker to come and then raise a motion, and at the same time they will just say, oh, this motion is actually referred to the House Committee on Oil and Gas, it's referred to the House Committee on Environmental, but then again, like I said, it all depends on how effective the follow-up process will actually be.
Okay, this brings me to our next question, a very big one, which have Nigerians have been concerned about. The 2026 budget is definitely one of the biggest yet we've seen in the history of Nigeria. Is the National Assembly doing enough to scrutinize the government spending? Because all this spending and the citizens are complaining that it is not translating to anything. What's going on?
Well, in terms of the 2026 budget, I think initially it was about 58 points. I can't really get the exact figure, but it was around 58 trillion naira or thereabout, and it was later increased to 68.32 trillion naira.
And adding that Nigerians are actually, we're owing more
Of
now
course.
compared to the
But
past.
then again, if we are to examine it from a holistic standpoint, we will come to, the conclusion that when it comes to checkmating, they've really been up and doing. I mean, we've seen a situation where I think recently, there was this issue about the Southeast Development Commission, of which one of the senators, Senator Ojus Okalu, was probing this particular commission as regards its expenditure. So much has really been done. Is it the NNPC? We've seen how a senator like Adam Toshimole has actually been checkmating most of these people. So
Yes.
when it comes to this particular angle, I mean, they've really been up and doing when it comes to checkmating it and trying as much as they can to prevent budget pardon. I mean, lot of activities has actually been done to water down, the issue of budget pardon, embezzlement, and all.
But in regards to budget pardon, recently an organization, or would I say an institution, was discovered. The PFIPC
Okay.
was discovered. And it was said that there was nothing, that there was not, it was operating and it was getting budget and everything, but it does not really do anything. And the governments are denying not having hands in it. How did it get past the executives and the legislative?
Well, I think this is a matter that is solely up to the court to decide. It's not for me to come and give an opinion about that. But then again, I mean, you can't expect Nigeria is too large a country for most of these things to actually be checkmated. So, like I said, it's something for the court to actually decide on. I think the last I checked or the last I read about it, this is actually a matter that I've actually gone to the court. So I
Yes.
don't really have an opinion about that. But then again, like I said, I still stand my ground when I say that this 10th assembly have been trying its best in order to ensure that the budget is actually being actualized for what it's for. in terms of, development of the people and seeing that the people actually get value for it. Because at the end of it all, it's not about naming figures. It's not about naming figures that are too large. It's about how, if there have been, if people benefit from it, if there have been a wealth transfer
of the motion on the people.
on the people, exactly.
Yes. That brings me to our next question, Edwin. Do constituency projects strengthen representation, or have lawmakers taken responsibilities meant for the executives?
If we are to see it, I mean, it is the lawmakers that actually know what their people are actually passing through, what they are suffering. So the angle I would like to approach this is that it is not, we don't want a situation where we are making lawmakers mini executives. No.
Yes.
We want a situation where they are able to, pinpoint the particular areas, the social amenities their people are lacking, and then call on the executives to actually work on them on this project. Because I mean, a situation where they are doing the roles that are meant for the executive, you now discover that there are no ways in which we can effectively checkmate them. I mean, people that are meant to be oversighting the executive are actually the ones doing the implementing what the executives. They should serve as a watchdog,
and not work for the executive.
Exactly, not work for the
That's why
executive.
we have so many lawmakers. We have the rep, we have the Senate, and there are a lot. The number is a lot.
Exactly.
Okay, if you have been watching, this has been Political Arena, and we have been assessing the performance of the 10th National Assembly with my guest, Edwin Winner. We'll be back shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back from that break. And Edwin, I would like for you to continue from where you stopped.
All right. So, like I was saying, in terms of the lawmakers actually carrying out constituency projects, I mean, I think that really should be worked on, because we've had instances. I think there was a recent report from the ICPC that states that some people, some of these lawmakers actually use this constituency project to actually siphon money. I mean, they even work on personal project and target constituency project.
Yes.
So these are instances why it is very much important for the executive to actually be left with the job or duties of implementing, why the lawmakers actually pinpoint the areas in which they are constituency are actually facing, some problems. It is very much important that that distinction is actually being drawn, because, like I've stated, constitutionally, their duties or the duties of the lawmakers hinges on lawmaking and oversight function, and there is no how you can now carry what is meant or what is ought to be done by the executive and then peg it to be done by the lawmakers. That will actually breach, that will be an overlap of functions, duplication of functions. So I think that is just my take on that.
Okay. The 10th National Assembly has passed major economic reforms, including the tax laws, and Nigerians are not really in, would I say, accordance or really want the tax law. They do not want that. So should we judge them by their passage or the impact it has made on Nigerians? Emphasis on the tax law.
If we are to look at that, I really think that the Tax Act is actually, or they are actually very important laws that we are being passed by this administration. Why? If we are to look at it from a global standpoint, I think you cannot compare a country like the United States of America in terms of taxing to Nigeria. I mean, they tax their citizens a lot, heavily. Go to the United Kingdom. Recently, there was, I think, a news that made the headline, where a fighter, I think Anthony Joshua, was saying that he's leaving United Kingdom permanently
for Dubai.
Yes. And if you look at it, you now begin to compare, the way, what was the reason? Because of the taxing.
Yes.
Most of these people, they make, millions of dollars, and then
recently Spain won the World Cup and they won millions of dollars.
Exactly.
I think they lost almost half of their money to taxing.
That is just the whole point. So Nigeria is a developing country, and we are trying as much as we can to actually ensure that we actually develop. So the whole issue of tasking is something that is a duty, is an obligation that citizens owe to the government. But then again, where it now becomes bad is where we don't now see what's the impact of these taxes that are being paid. But generally, I really feel that the tax laws are really worth having.
The citizens are asking, beyond taxing, are we being paid enough to actually be able to afford the task? Because a civil servant's minimum wage is 70,000 naira. Nigeria of today, what can 70,000 naira afford? 70,000 naira cannot pay rent. You would have to save almost 70,000 naira for a whole year to be able to afford a roof over your head. Talk more of feeding, and transportation is another thing on its own. So, should we be taxed if we can't even earn enough to pay the task?
You now have to look at the provisions of the Tax Act. I mean, the drafters of this particular law were so prudent in doing it. The law is not coming to tax you on 70,000 naira. As a matter of fact, you only get taxed when your annual income is up to 800,000. So, well, if it's up to 800,000, the law has a particular percentage that it takes from the particular income. So it is not saying that if you are earning 70,000 naira, you should come and pay for it. You should come and take money from that chunk and then you pay your tax. No, that is not how the whole tax something works. It works with you having a particular income, and if that income has actually exceeded a certain threshold, you get to pay tax. So they were considerate when they actually drafted that.
Yes, that is true. But it all boils down now to communication. Do citizens know this? Like, do they understand this? When you want to do something, you have to explain to them that this is it, this is it, this is that. Regardless, in all forms, not every English is not anybody's father's language. You have to explain to them in English, in Yoruba, in Hausa, in Igbo, just for them to understand. But they're all complaining about the tax, tax, tax. While they don't even understand that they are not being taxed as much as you're not earning 800,000 naira and above, you're not being taxed. But you would see somebody that is not earning that much also complaining about tax.
Well, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. If we have to look at it, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. The fact that no one is coming to, take you to prison for having paid this so amount of tax, provided that you don't actually, qualify. I mean, I know that for some businesses, you won't be taxed if your revenue is not up to 50 million naira. So I don't even know. And that is why I find it somewhat hilarious when I see people saying that if you want to send money for someone, you should put a certain description. So all this, like I said, ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
At one point, it became a trend. And if you even visit the local markets, they'll tell you, oh, we're being taxed, hence why things are so expensive. Meanwhile, they're just deliberately making things expensive for themselves.
Of course.
Okay, so renewed calls for another Southeast states. Is state creation really the best answer to regional imbalance?
Well, regional imbalance, that all boils down to political grievances. I mean, we should now ask ourselves, what is the whole essence of creating another state? We currently have 36 states in Nigeria, and the Southeast has just 5 states. But then again, you discover that moving or agitation for this particular state all hinges on the fact that they want, to expand their coast in terms of, political leanings. That is why you will see that the angle they mostly look at it from is the fact that, oh, the Northeast has so and so
many
number of states, and then so we now ask ourselves, what do we really want to, curb in terms of this state creation? What are we seeking to achieve? And not just state creation, we now have to ask ourselves, can this state that is being created sustain itself? What is the revenue generation? The state that will be broken into two or be split into two, what do they stand to lose? These are the things that we really have to take into consideration. The military head of state that actually divided our state, they did it thoughtfully. So they carefully did it. Not that we just want to create states just because of political grievances and then they go ahead in creating states.
Speaking of thoughtfully, if we look at each state in Nigeria, there is no state in Nigeria that is not at least, let me say, 60% self-sufficient.
Yes.
Because if they don't have cocoa, they have limestone. If they do not have limestone, they have gold. Speak of gold, many states in Nigeria have gold.
Yes.
We just have to look into the mining sector to harness that. Okay, so that brings me to the next question. If lawmakers demand accountability from the executive, shouldn't the same stand be applied to the National Assembly itself? You mentioned some senators siphoning funds in the name of community projects. Meanwhile, it's just for their personal accounts. So what do we have to say about that?
Well, in terms of accountability, I really feel it is the people that, should ordinarily hold their leaders accountable. I mean, I've said it several times that most of these people that actually elect these leaders, they don't ordinarily know that they have to hold their people accountable or their lawmakers accountable, and that is why their lawmakers can come and then they go all gaga, they try they just shout and oh. But then again, despite that, accountability is something that they themselves ordinarily ought to give to the people who elected them there. It is, I mean, and then they can actually hold the executive accountable in the sense that, oh, what is actually being done? If you need to send some money, what do you want to do with the money? And why is this so and so? I mean, you checkmate them. But in terms of accountability, I really feel it is the people that have the power. It is people that have, all it takes in order to demand accountability from the lawmakers they sent to the National Assembly to represent them.
And like you have said, ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
It's not an excuse.
It's not an excuse. Okay, so between the 8th, 9th, and 10th assemblies, which has exercised the strongest oversight of the executive and why?
Well, I really don't want to,
dive into that.
No, I really don't want to pinpoint and say that, oh, it is this one that has actually been, much more effective, because from my understanding, I know that the eighth assembly were at loggerhead, or they were very much confrontational with the executive. I mean,
Yes.
we could see the Bukola Saraki's led administration. I mean, he went to court throughout. The other day, I think I saw Dino, that's Dino, who is now a lawyer, saying that he had to follow Bukola Saraki to court almost every time. So, but then again, if we are looking at it, we now just take the people's interest at heart, and not necessarily anything that is being done for the interest of the people. You should actually what should supersede, and not what a fight of pride. If we are to look at the ninth assembly, I think it was fairly a smooth one. There were not too much friction compared to the eighth house, and then we finally have the tenth, which has actually chosen to adopt a softer part on the part of the executive. So I really feel that at the end of the day, it should be what is best for the people that they should actually chase and pursue.
Not a struggle for power.
Not a struggle for power. Not a struggle for pride
and dominance.
Exactly.
Because the legislature trying to show, oh, we are for the people, and the executive trying to show we are above all people. Okay, so that brings me to our next question, and we're going towards the end. Leadership says important negotiations happen behind the scenes. How do we know that it is effective diplomacy and not simply lack of confrontation?
Well, if you are to see that, there's an angle you can look at it. Diplomacy and secrecy, I think they are things that go hand in hand, and they cannot be divorced or detached from politics. That is just, the way politics are meant to be. Now, it is very much important, because it's not everything that happens that you come and then expose out there. I mean, there are people that ordinarily have their opinions. There are people that say, oh, do it this way, don't do it that way. This is what you have to do. So I really feel that diplomacy is something that is very much needed in politics. It is something that, it cannot be divorced from politics. It cannot be divorced from politics. And it's an effective tool for actually ensuring that both parties are actually doing the interest or representing the interest of the people in politics.
Okay. And it is known that if you agree to be an executive, there are some blames you would have to take regardless of whatever you do, because the citizens can definitely not see everything going on behind closed doors. And you can't do everything on open ground, regardless of transparency. If you have been watching, this has been Political Arena with me, Oniye Shukrah, and my guest, Edwin Winner. We discussed and assessed the performance of the 10th Assembly, and it has been agreed upon that no matter the amount of laws that has been passed, we do not judge by that. Rather, we would judge by the impact it has had on Nigerians and what is going to translate for Nigerians in the next couple of years. I remain Oniye Shukrah, and this has been Political Arena. Thank you for watching.